Welcome back. One of the pieces of advice that I received when I first decided that I was going to start really studying or trying to get better at chess was to study grandmaster games and I guess try to figure out why those moves were played or what they're good for. And I finally decided to do it. So I thought, well, where would I find grandmaster games? When you look at some of the more popular YouTube channels on chess, they're constantly bringing up famous games from the past, but I don't know where they're getting them. So I just searched in a search engine, and I came across the chess.com/games. It's not showing up in the video here, but at the top it says chess database, and it says search through millions of top games played by the strongest chess players, blah, blah, blah. And here you can see the pictures of Garry Kasparov, Bobby Fischer, Capablanca, Magnus Carlsen, and so on. Paul Morphy, Nakamura, Anand, Tal, Judith Polgar, Alekhine, and so on. So that's one place. Also on chess.com, there is chess.com/library. And again, you can't see the top of the page, but it says library at the top. And you do see the tabs here, your collections and community collections. Under community collections, I found Bobby Fischer, memorable games, most instructive chess games, Karpov's Caro-Kann, which, well, I'm studying the Caro-Kann, so let's click on that. And it lists 100 games. It says all the games from GM Karpov's book on the Caro-Kann, PGN taken from Bill Wall's website. Okay, so I found a game where Karpov played black with the Caro-Kann, as shown here, and you can click on the Analyze button to look at it. So that's the game I'm going to go through today, but first I was going to show you on other websites. I found several websites that I really am not familiar with that have a bunch of Grandmaster games. For example, this one. I guess the user interface on these is just odd to me after playing on Lichess and chess.com. Here in the left column you can search. For example, I searched for, well, let's search for Karpov just to be consistent. And when you search, it lists a bunch of games. Karpov versus Kasparov. Well, a bunch of Karpov versus Kasparov, actually. Jakovenko, not sure, versus Karpov. And there are just lots of games listed. There are a lot of draws between Karpov and Kasparov. But anyway, on these sites, when you click on the game, it gives, like I said, to me it looks like a pretty odd interface. Off to the right, what you can't see is a list of the moves. Okay, sorry, I just accidentally scrolled and it did that. I did not mean to do that. Here, Kasparov has opened with d4, and you can click through the moves. There's no sound. There's a weird animation to the moves. I'm just not used to that. It'll probably be distracting. So anyway, I'm not going to go with that one, but I am going to go with the library game that I found on chess.com under Karpov's Caro-Kann. All right, I apologize for the three-minute introduction, but this is what we have. Kamsky versus Karpov in 1993. And I have reversed the board so we're seeing it from Karpov's point of view. E4, very common opening. C6. I know this is the Caro-Kann because I say studied, but I'm sure I'm not studying it in the same way that a master chess player would. I have learned a few lines in the Caro-Kann. I know that the idea of C6 is to try to take some claim on the center and prepare to move D5 to protect this square. It's a way to avoid overly familiar lines by playing E5 or gambit style play like D5, the Scandinavian, and also avoiding Sicilian positions like C5. Okay, so I do know that much already. The common continuation of this is what Kamsky plays, D4, and Karpov plays D5. I've played this far before, so I know what this is. There's the option to exchange here. That would be the exchange variation. There's the option to advance, which is called the advance variation. There's several other lines that I have seen. I've seen knight to C3 here to hit both of those pawns. And that way it lets black decide if we want to exchange here and get a knight in the center already, assuming that knight c3 was move 3 here. I have even seen this, although that's probably not master level play, because then you take the pawn and you're immediately threatening that knight. But anyway, I have played this far before. What does Kamsky play next? Knight to d2. I don't think I've seen that in playing the Caro-Kann. Okay, what was the purpose of this move? Okay, it's protecting the e4 pawn, just as knight c3 would have done. But knight c3 has the added advantage of hitting this pawn in case they take at some point. This, I guess, is assuming. You know what? I think another difference is that this doesn't block in the c pawn. Okay, so I haven't seen that before, but I understand the idea of it. I think not only, just like knight c3, it guards the e4 pawn, but unlike knight to c3, it doesn't block this pawn, so this pawn can still advance. Okay, I think I understand that. Okay, Karpov took the pawn, which I think I probably would have done as well. You're exchanging one center pawn for another, and getting rid of the tension here. One downside, I guess, is that now you don't have a d pawn. I mean, the opponent has it, but the opponent doesn't have an e pawn. So I'm assuming that Kamsky took back with the knight, which is the whole reason he moved it there. I'm assuming Kamsky's a he. Almost everybody playing at the master level in those days was a he, but the first name is Gata. I don't know if that's a he or a she. Anyway, let's stick with the names. Okay, I don't know what I would do here if that is where we got in this position. Normal development move might be knight to f6, but this knight's already guarding against that spot and would probably trade with a messing up of the pawn structure. So maybe don't want to do that. I think if we move the e pawn in order to get out our dark squared bishop, that blocks our light squared bishop if the e pawn is there. So maybe we should get out the light squared bishop first. That's probably what I would do here. What did Karpov do? Karpov moved the knight here, which blocks this bishop and does nothing with development here. But it does develop this piece with the idea maybe to go here at some point, because well, you can't develop it here because of the Caro-Kann c6 pawn. The knight couldn't go to its normal spot, so that is one place to develop the knight, but it can't go any further because that pawn is guarding those two squares. So I'm not sure about this move. Not sure what is it preparing, or every move should prepare something or prevent something, or follow at least some general principle. I guess this is staking some claim on the center. It's looking, you know what, I just realized, I bet what it is, it's preparing knight to f6. This knight move, knight to d7, guards the f6 square. So it's preparing that so you can play knight f6 without damaging the pawn structure. That's my guess. Okay, how did Kamsky respond? Kamsky just jumped in there with that knight. This looks like something I would have seen played in a blitz game at my level. Moving a knight closer with no apparent reason, which can easily be knocked out, just thrown away. Okay, Karpov plays this, which is okay. So I did guess that the knight to d7 move was preparing this. It protects that square. Okay, so the knights protect each other, and now we've developed two pieces, whereas Kamsky has only developed one piece. And again, I'm not sure about that previous knight move, because that looks like you can just kick that out pretty quick. But anyway, what does Kamsky do? Bishop to d3. Normal developing move, controlling a center square, getting ready to castle after getting this knight out. And Karpov plays e6. Okay, so he's not worried about developing the light squared bishop. Because not only did he block it with the knight, earlier I talked about this pawn move would block in this bishop. Well, he's blocked it in twice. So he's planning on this light squared bishop staying there for a while. Okay. I think this move is obvious, that it releases the dark squared bishop, which then I guess prepares to castle at some point. Although you can't castle, or you wouldn't want to castle now. I don't think, because how much pressure, whoops, that's a bad diagonal, how much pressure Kamsky is putting on this pawn, I think. Actually, no, you might want to castle sooner. I don't know. Right now we have two defenders on this pawn, so not sure. But surely that's what that does. It does two things. It stakes some claim on the center. Now we have double claim on the d5 square. Both of these pawns hit the d5 square. And maybe preparing to defend a knight here at some point. But I think mostly the reason for e6 is to free the dark squared bishop. Okay. What does Kamsky do? Okay, that's kind of what we thought he would do after he moved the bishop out. We kind of guessed that he would move the knight out because he is preparing to castle. Okay. And Karpov plays, I assume, getting the dark squared bishop out. He just played e6. Okay. He did play the dark squared bishop out, preparing to castle, perhaps. This pawn will still have two defenders after castling. The knight and the king will both guard h7. Okay. And this does hit one center square. We're controlling, well, not we. Karpov is controlling a bunch of center squares and center adjacent squares. This knight is hitting that square and that one, and the bishop is hitting these squares. The pawns are hitting all of these squares, and this knight's hitting two of them. So he's doing a good job of setting up defenses, preparing to castle. These two knights guard each other. This bishop is undefended because the queen can't get to it right now. Okay. And Kamsky plays queen to e2. I thought he was preparing to castle. What does queen to e2 do? It doesn't help anything on this diagonal because it was already on that diagonal. But now it's on an additional diagonal, I guess. But, I mean, where are we going on this diagonal? That's the only square the bishop can move to on that diagonal. Maybe it wants to continue controlling or patrolling that diagonal after this bishop moves away a different direction. I don't know. Not sure about queen to e2. I have seen in some of the evaluations of my games, often the suggested stockfish move that I didn't make was queen to e2 or queen to c2, or if I'm black, you know, a queen to e7, queen to c7, and I'm never quite sure exactly what those moves do. Obviously, I know what this one does if the king is already castled, and then we're aiming down here. That one I understand. Most of the time I don't understand queen to e7 or queen to e2. I have tried that one before. Okay, what does Karpov do? Okay, he finally plays h6, which I thought he was going to play as soon as this knight went here. So where's the knight going to go? Is it going to go back? Oh, maybe that's the reason for queen to e2. When he moved queen to e2, it's guarding a retreat for this knight. But the bishop was already guarding that square. I'm not sure. Let's see where the knight goes. It did go there. Knight to e4. We have an opportunity to trade here, but I don't know. Would it be opportune to trade there? I guess okay, because I already noted that this bishop is undefended. So now you either have to run away with the bishop and then do this knight trade here, or leave the bishop where you put it. And obviously you wanted the bishop here because you put it here. So it makes sense to trade in the center and Whether they take back with the bishop or the queen doesn't matter, because it means we have the bishop where we want it, and then we can put this knight here. Let's see if that's what happens. Okay, he trades the knight in the middle, and the queen takes. Now put this knight here, which would hit the queen. Is that what's going to happen? Yes. Okay. See, I understand this. I've never, like, as I mentioned, as far back as knight to d2. I think I said knight to d7 earlier, but as far back as knight to d2, I was unfamiliar with this line. I don't think I'd ever seen that variation of the Caro-Kann. And I am looking here. This is called the Caro-Kann Defense Karpov variation, main line. I don't think that's what it was called until Karpov played it, but it is called the Karpov main line. You know what? Can I just move this over and you can see what I'm seeing there? Okay. Yeah, it's called the Karpov variation and main line here. Okay. But yeah, so none of this I seen before. Usually I see the advanced variation or the exchange variation. This was something different. But anyway, so he's moved the knight here, obviously threatening the queen, and also now protecting his bishop. Okay, what does Kamsky do? Kamsky brings the queen across. The evaluation bar didn't like that a lot, because right before, yeah, it had Kamsky. Okay, it's saying Kamsky should just come back. I wasn't looking at the engine before, but now I am. That was the best move, and then here and here were about equal, but that takes us to equality, according to Stockfish. Okay, how does Karpov respond to this, or how would I respond? We can just castle now, can't we? I think we can just castle now. Let's see what he does. He does not castle. That's kind of brave. What is he planning? Because it's putting this right into this skewer here. But I guess that's as safe as anything. Man, I wonder why he didn't castle, because all these masters and coaches tell us we should castle all the time. He didn't. He just moved it up there. I mean, it adds a defender to the knight. It adds a defender to the bishop. And it frees the rook the same as castling would do, while also leaving the rook over here. That's always been one of my problems with castling, is when you castle, now your rook's over here. And sometimes you want it over there. Maybe that's what it is. Not only does this do the things I already said, but it adds a defender to the rook. So if there were to be some sort of shenanigans, like one of these pieces trying to sneak in here, and this pawn disappears, we have a X-ray on the queen. Okay, what does Kamsky do? He puts his knight right there in the middle. Okay. What's he aiming at? What are we aiming at? This pawn's defended. This pawn's as defended as it was before. The king was already defending that pawn, and it still is. But obviously you don't want to have to do that. So what would... and you can't move this knight now. You could before. But since we moved the king here, you can't move that knight. Okay. Should we defend this pawn with a queen move? Or a rook? No, I don't know. Well, we can't castle now. Castling would defend that pawn with the rook, right? Okay, what does Karpov do? Oh, he just takes it. He's about to lose this knight, isn't he? Because that pawn, and now you can't move that knight. This looks bad for Karpov. The engine says Kamsky has a slight advantage again. Okay. Well, I assume Kamsky took back with the pawn? Yes. And now you've got pressure on this pinned piece, which, again, cannot move. But Karpov had this up his sleeve. which seems like a weak... oh. Okay. I was going to say it seems like a weak check because you can block with the pawn, you can block with the bishop, but he had an idea of why he wasn't worried about this, about the knight. Okay, well, I wouldn't have seen that. Blocks with the pawn, he takes the pawn with check. All right. Clearly he knows how to play chess. That's why we've heard of him before. Okay. And Kamsky blocks with the bishop. Okay, finally developing his last bishop. I noticed this bishop's not defended, because when he moved the c-pawn to block the check, that bishop's not defended. Let's see if that becomes a problem. And Karpov plays b6. I suppose preparing a bishop move. Well, not that one. That would just lose a bishop. But maybe this? Because he also hasn't developed his bishop yet. Okay. And Kamsky says... okay, Kamsky castles, taking advantage of the open file here. Not sure why he didn't castle over there. Usually there's a reason to castle kingside, but I guess in this case it was the open file. Whereas if you castle kingside... the rook has one more move to make before it gets to this open file, since the center has been blown open. Okay. Oh, and I had just mentioned that that bishop was unprotected. So, it's protected now. All right. Karpov attacks the queen directly and now unpins this knight. Not bad. Where's the queen gonna go? Whiplash. Kamsky went all the way across, hitting this undefended pawn. But we had just guessed that Karpov was about to put this bishop here, which would defend that pawn. Let's see if that's what he does. No. He just moves it instead of defending it. Which means when we put the bishop here, it will have an open diagonal all the way down the board. Okay. I suppose he could have defended it here too, when before moving the pawn. He could have defended the pawn this way, but that puts it in line with the rook down there. So maybe not the best plan. Okay. Moving the pawn forward, which makes this bishop not going anywhere. It does leave a diagonal open for the queen. I don't know if that's dangerous. Let's see what happens. We bring the other rook to the center, to the open file, because there's no pawns. No white pawns here. This file is completely open. This one is semi-open. I've learned that much in the last year. Okay, Karpov decided not to go with this diagonal since there's nothing over here to aim at anymore. So he moved here instead of to b7. Again, another direct threat on the queen. Where's it going to go? Backed up one. Pinning that pawn. Okay. Kamsky brought his rook to the open file. Rooks belong on open files. I plan on doing a video on the rules of the rooks once I learn them. I mean, I know several of them, but I don't know which one takes precedence. I know rooks belong on open files. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. Rooks belong on the 7th rank. Well, they can't do all of those at once, I don't think. No, I don't think they can do all of those at once. So you have to know which part of the game that those happen. Well, here we don't have any passed pawns, and there's no way to get them to the 7th rank, so I guess rooks on open files is the best we can do. Okay. Kamsky plays g3. Okay. Preparing perhaps this. Perhaps preparing a pawn push. And Karpov saw that he was preparing a pawn push and brought his queen back here. Okay. It's a little extra layer of defense for the king. I mean, for the bishop and, well, the area of the king. Okay, Kamsky moves a... Ah, that pawn is pinned. Okay. That's why that's a perfectly safe move, because the c pawn is pinned. So he has opened further the diagonal for this rook, or the file for the rook. Although we don't have any immediate threats right now, so I'm not sure. I'm looking around what could be a great move for Karpov. I don't know. I mean, I was going to say maybe retreat the king back in here, but you can't move the king right now. That's one consequence of this bishop move, is that it hits this knight, which is only defended by the king. Okay, so what does Karpov do? Brings the bishop back. Okay, I guess opening up this rook. But that rook, I mean, that bishop's defended, so I'm not sure. Maybe that's the best place for the bishop. I really don't know. It's still guarding this diagonal, but now it's also it's defending that pawn. Okay. Kamsky moves his king over, which turned out to not be good. In the peripheral vision, I saw the evaluation bar is getting smaller. Just a little bit. Stockfish is still thinking about that. But yeah, that king move gave Karpov an advantage for some reason. But why did he move it is my question. It wasn't in danger. Karpov doesn't have a dark squared bishop, and there's no way for him to get his queen to this diagonal anytime soon. Was he worried about something happening here? Maybe that's what he was worried about. But again, we can't take that right now. This king has to go somewhere. And again, if we move the king, we just lose that knight straight away. Maybe he's planning on moving the knight so he can move his king. Oh, maybe that's why he moved his bishop. Interesting. Okay, maybe that's why he moved his bishop, so he could put his knight here. Then his king's not stuck defending the knight, and the king can get out of that pin. Or I don't know, maybe he was thinking about running his king this way, and that's the reason for the bishop move. Because he's got to get out of this pin so he can take that bishop. Maybe. All right, what does Karpov do? Oh. Okay. I guess he's maybe thinking of doubling here, or he just wants a shield in front of his king so he can get his king out of that pin. Maybe that's what it is. Let's find out. Kamsky brings forward his f-pawn, trying to, I guess, break up this structure on this side, one way or the other. And if not, if there's no takers, maybe thinking about breaking up the structure right here, because this pawn is pinned as well. So yeah, he can just roll right in here, can't he? That pawn used to be defended when the bishop was there. Okay, but Stockfish still says Karpov has an advantage. And I haven't been looking at the recommended moves, but he made the recommended move. That's what Stockfish's top move was there. Which, I mean, sorry, I had to adjust my position, but it makes sense considering he had just moved this rook forward, that he was thinking about possibly doubling and setting up some sort of battery through here. All right, Kamsky brought that bishop back, which turned out to not be great. I wonder what his best move was supposed to have been. Is he thinking about coming around this way? Whoops. Coming around this way? That I don't know. Karpov's up a pawn. All right. So what does Karpov do here? Ah. He wasn't thinking of going there. He was maybe thinking of going here. Or at least that's what Karpov was worried about. Stockfish says Karpov's best move is bishop to b5. Well, he didn't see that, and I certainly wouldn't have seen it. What does that do? Other than, I mean, it controls a diagonal, but... And that he can do that now since this bishop got out of the way, but I'm not sure what the point of that would be. Really don't know. You'd think at some point you'd want your light squared bishop over here pointing this way. But anyway, he did not make one of the top 3 moves when he brought this rook back one. But again, maybe he was worried about this. Why else would you have brought the bishop back other than to reroute it to one of these squares? Wait, but if that was the case, if that was his reason for moving back, no, he could have just gone here. I don't know. Okay. Or maybe he brought it back preparing a pawn push. Don't know. Kamsky plays his best move here, which is to take that knight with check. Which basically forces the king out, doesn't it? Because you move over. If you move over and move out a check this way, well, you lose an exchange here, as well as the piece you just lost. So I guess you have to take with your king. Oh yeah, it's the only move that's not a blunder. Okay. Not a huge blunder. Huge blunder if you don't do that. That's what I thought. All right, I wasn't completely out of it. All right, what does Kamsky do? He plays... I'm going to guess he's going to do something with that pawn he had advanced. Yes, check. Does this force a king move, or do you take with the pawn? Well, Stockfish says take with the pawn, and that's what Karpov did. I'm thinking if you don't take here, you're going to get taken. So I think Kamsky's probably going to take here. Yes. We're still at equality, and of course he takes back with the rook. Kamsky... Not sure what Kamsky is going to do. His queen is still hitting this little pawn chain here. Kind of useless. He could check. And this bishop is posing some problem through here. But I don't know. What does Kamsky do? He pushes the c-pawn. Not sure what that does. I'm not. Is it because we're getting close to an end game, so he's transferring his pawns to the other color? What does that do? Well, I mean, obviously it protects these 2 squares. But it stops protecting these 2 squares. So maybe he thought it was more important to protect these 2. And maybe he's thinking of defending it here in a second with another pawn. Okay. If I'm Karpov, I have no idea what to do here. We are beyond my level of expertise. Except I just remembered the rules of the rooks. Rooks belong in the 7th rank. This would maybe be a good time to put it there. And you're hitting a pawn and a bishop. Maybe. I don't know. What does it say his best move is? Well, it says king to g7 is what Stockfish says, but he played king to e7, which still is equality. Okay, I realize I've gone on for some time, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. But Kamsky plays his best move, which is lining up a battery on the king, but that pawn is well protected right now, so I don't think that's a worry. Karpov plays one of his best moves, which is f6. Okay, that confused me because I had just said how well defended that pawn was, but now we've removed one of our own defenders. Usually you're supposed to let the opponent remove the defenders. Oh, maybe he wants to reroute a second defender, a different defender to that pawn? I don't know. Kamsky tries to chip away over here or create a passed pawn. If you take it, he gets a passed pawn anyway. I know that much about endgames. I've worked that far. That here you're kind of, if you don't take, it's passed. Oh, but he can't pass it right now because of our bishop. And if he takes, we take back, I guess. Maybe that's why Karpov moved this. Maybe he thought this was coming. Okay. He takes it, which Stockfish said was the only move that maintains equality. And I'm assuming Kamsky took back, yes. Now what? Karpov moves his queen over, creating a battery of his own. Oh, and adding another defender to the pawn. Okay. See, I'm not completely unknowledgeable of chess. I understand some of what's going on here. We have to defend this pawn, especially after that battery lined up, and also they can put this here because the pawn's pinned. Okay, what does Kamsky do? Oh, sneaking around the back. Sneaking around the back. Look at that. There's all kinds of checks to be had over here. Now do we recastle our king on the other side? No. After all the work we went through to defend this pawn, we move it here, so now it's defended this way. Okay. Ooh. H5 was not a good move. Okay. It was not one of the moves that maintained equality. But since he's brought his queen over here, now we can't take the pawn with the bishop. Okay. Karpov also sneaking around behind. These guys are sneaky. I never would have seen a separate way to attack that pawn. Okay. What does Kamsky do? Check. Nice. But the advantage creeps up a little bit. Oh, wow. And I am looking at Stockfish now. It says Karpov's best defense is to block with the bishop, but he moved the king, which was a mistake. Okay, as Stockfish counts mistakes. In my game, if you run the game review, this would have been counted as a mistake, because now they have this huge advantage. If they play h6, and that's what Kamsky played, what do you do now? Do you drop the rook down to threaten the queen? Oh, that's what they did. Yeah, that's what Stockfish says, and that's... No, I misread that. Now they put the rook on the 7th. Okay. That's Stockfish's second recommendation. That's its first recommendation. Kamsky didn't play any of those. He went up there offering a queen trade, which took away almost all of his advantage, as long as Karpov doesn't take it. Look at that, but Karpov did take it. Kamsky, that's a mistake. Now Kamsky has a 3-point advantage. There's not much that Karpov can do. This late in the game, you're down that far, and he doesn't play his best move. His best move is to get behind the passed pawn. We've now hit all the rook rules in this one game. Without even, I didn't know that was going to happen. Rooks belong on open files. We did that. Rooks belong on the 7th rank, or the 2nd rank if you're playing with the black pieces. And now rooks belong behind passed pawns. That's Stockfish's top move for Karpov. He played the next one, which is to just threaten this bishop, and that's a mistake too. No. Engine is saying Kamsky needs to play king to c1, but he didn't. He decided not to trade bishops, and now we're back at near equality. And now Karpov gets behind the passed pawn, which advances, protected by the bishop. But it can't go any further because the rook's protecting that square. Okay, now we're at equality. Karpov goes this way, I assume, trying to zigzag over here. Also protecting this pawn, maybe. What does Kamsky do? Does not play one of the top 3 moves. Computer wants him to... No. No, that's what he did. He went back here for some reason to protect the pawn from afar. The computer wanted something else, but this is 93. There was no Stockfish then. That was a blunder. That's the blunder that lost him the game? Maybe? And now F5. bishop to g4. Karpov didn't see those, but he saw the third best move, which was bishop to e6. Not sure about that. What does that do? He's guarding that pawn already. Doesn't... I don't know. Okay, Kamsky moves the rook over to g1, which in now... a minute ago, Stockfish said that was its top move, but now that's a blunder. Oh my goodness. And now Karpov plays f5. The bishop... Whoops. The bishop's not protecting this pawn anymore. I'm guessing the reason for the rook move was to come this way with check and to guard the pawn at the same time. And that's what Kamsky does. Karpov goes here. Now the rook has to move. Does it take over here? That's what I would probably do. Okay. He takes that pawn. So now he's out of danger as still guarding this pawn. So how can Karpov get rid of that passed pawn? Oh, it says he can play e4. Forget about the passed pawn for a second and start challenging this down here. The bishop has to drop back, and Karpov's on the move. Again, best move. He now has two connected passed pawns in enemy territory. Okay, I understand this. I didn't understand everything, but I understand this part, and I've understood, I think, 60%, 70% of this game. Okay, that was also not great. Also, best move. Wow. Right here couldn't... Oh, I was going to say, couldn't he have just taken? That's what we would have done, right? Some of us, but no, he's got to stay behind this pawn. But he attacks the bishop with the pawn, which forces the bishop to move again, which it does. Now, does he move another pawn? What does he do? What does he do? Oh, this is sneaky. I like this. That was Stockfish's top move, because now when you move this pawn, you're going to be in check, and you don't have to worry about that one not being protected anymore. Nice. So the king moves, right? Okay. Gets out of that discovery. Oh, and now we take... Wow. Okay. That was good. That was sneaky. Because that bishop move here had a double purpose. Not only did it add an extra attacker to the pawn, which was your biggest thorn in your side right now, but it threatened this and advancement of the passed pawn. So he had to move the king. He couldn't move the pawn. Okay. And now what can Kamsky do except to go after this? Doesn't matter. King gets out. He says, you can have the pawn. I'm just not going to let you do it with check. And he takes the pawn. And yeah, things are getting bad for Mr. Kamsky or Mrs. Kamsky or Ms. Karpov doesn't even play one of the top moves here, but he just chops off a pawn of his own. Says, well, you took my pawn, I'm going to take yours. And at this point, Kamsky resigned. Nobody in my level, I think, would resign at this point because you're just down a pawn, right? I mean, the difference is, I do understand that he has two connected passed pawns. He's got the king trapped on the back rank, whereas white has only, white's only down one pawn, but neither of these are passed. He can create a passed pawn, but then Karpov's got three passed pawns, and he'll only have this one. 4 squares from promotion. And these are really close right now. Can the bishop even stop this one? I mean, he can sacrifice for it right now, but then who's going to stop the next one? Okay, I can see why he resigned, but I think at my level, and most of my viewers probably, we would keep playing at this point. But yeah, clearly Karpov won this handily here at the end, but only because of that mistake. How far back was that mistake? Yeah, because right here we were at equality. What was the mistake? Was it right there? Yep, it was right there. Yeah, right here is where Stockfish says you have to move this rook to g1 or put this on e4. Not all the way back there. But Kamsky moved it all the way back there and then never had a chance. Wow. I guess this is keeping the bishop tied to that pawn. And then when he moved that over, it was too late. Yeah, now it's too late. Now the bishop's not guarding that passed pawn anymore, so he had to go there. Drives the bishop back, sets up this. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, thanks for putting up with me. This is one of my longest videos, possibly my longest or second longest in my entire time on YouTube. But it's one of the things I need to do, and I'm probably not going to do them all on video, but go through master games is what I was told, and try to figure out why the moves were played, what they prevent, what they threaten, what their purpose was, and it's supposed to make me better. So we'll see. Thanks for watching.